The gym was dimly lit, the faint hum of fluorescent lights filling the empty space. I wasn't supposed to be there, not tonight. But life has a way of pushing you toward places you'd rather avoid, and tonight was no different. I had forgotten my phone charger in Claire's car earlier that day, and with her gym session running late, I figured I'd swing by and grab it before heading home. Simple enough. Claire and I had a routine, one that had been steady for years. Wednesday evenings were her gym nights. She said it helped her clear her head after the stress of work. Yoga and spin class, she'd tell me with a smile, her bag slung over her shoulder. It was a small ritual in our marriage, one I'd never questioned. Until now. The parking lot was nearly empty when I pulled in, my headlights slicing through the night. Claire's car was parked near the entrance, just as I'd expected. I grabbed my keys and headed inside, the chilly air prickling my skin as I passed through the double doors. The gym's receptionist, a college-age guy with a tired expression, barely glanced up as I walked past. He didn't even ask for my ID. Maybe it was the late hour, or maybe I just didn't look like someone up to no good. Irony, considering what I was about to find. I made my way toward the locker rooms, my steps echoing in the empty hallway. The gym felt deserted, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every sound. I told myself Claire was probably finishing up a spin class or chatting with a friend. I told myself there was nothing unusual about her being here this late. But deep down, I felt it, that gnawing sense of unease that whispers when something's not right. As I rounded the corner, I heard voices. Low, intimate, muffled by the walls, but unmistakable. I slowed my steps, straining to hear. The words were indistinct, but the tone was clear. This wasn't casual conversation. I crept closer, the sound of my heartbeat loud in my ears. The voices were coming from one of the training rooms, the door slightly ajar. The flickering light inside cast long shadows on the floor, like something out of a bad movie. I paused outside the door, my breath hitching as I peered through the crack. There they were, Claire, her back to me, her blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail. And Mike Stanton, my coach. They stood close, too close, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that screamed intimacy. Mike's hand rested on her arm, his thumb brushing her skin in a gesture that felt both casual and deliberate. I froze, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. It couldn't be what it looked like. Claire wasn't like that. We weren't like that. But then she spoke, her voice soft and full of something I couldn't ignore. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Mike, she said. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I waited for him to push her away, to tell her she was confused, that this wasn't right. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low and soothing. You don't have to figure it out alone, he said. I'm here. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My hands clenched into fists, my nails biting into my palms as I fought the urge to burst into the room. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I turned and walked away, my chest tight and my vision blurred. The drive home was a blur, the steering wheel trembling under my white-knuckled grip. Every moment replayed in my mind, each one twisting the knife deeper. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, that there was some reasonable explanation for what I'd seen. But the look in Claire's eyes, the way she leaned into him, it wasn't the kind of thing you could explain away. By the time I got home, the house felt different, like a stranger's place. Claire wasn't back yet, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted her to come home at all. I sat in the dark, staring at the empty spot on the couch where she usually curled up with a book. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling. My mind raced with questions I didn't want to ask, each one more damning than the last. When Claire finally came through the door, her gym bag slung over her shoulder, she looked the same as always, calm, composed, like nothing had happened. She smiled when she saw me, but there was something off about it, something forced. Hey, she said, dropping her bag by the door. You're up late. I forced a smile, the effort making my face ache. Yeah, I said, my voice tight. Just couldn't sleep? She nodded, her eyes lingering on mine for a moment before she headed upstairs. I watched her go, my chest tight with a mix of anger and heartbreak. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as my thoughts spiraled. Who was this woman I thought I knew? And what was she hiding? By morning, one thing was clear. I needed answers. And I wasn't stopping until I got them. The morning after seeing Claire with Mike Stanton felt like stepping into a different reality. The weight of what I'd witnessed hung over me like a storm cloud, suffocating and relentless. She moved around the house as if nothing had changed, humming softly as she poured her morning coffee, oblivious to the chaos brewing inside me. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched mug. The question burned in my throat. How could you do this to me? But the words never came. Instead, I forced a smile, my voice strained as I said, "Morning." Claire glanced over, her expression as neutral as ever. "Morning," she said brightly. "Busy day ahead?" The casualness of her tone made my stomach twist. Was she testing me? Or did she really think I hadn't seen anything? I nodded, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Yeah, a lot on my plate," I said. She smiled, taking a sip of her coffee before heading upstairs to get ready for work. As soon as she was out of sight, my facade crumbled. I clenched my fists, my mind racing with questions I couldn't escape. Was this the first time? Or had I been blind to this for months? By the time she left the house, the doubt had turned into resolve. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Not until I had proof. The first step was simple: tracking her movements. Claire's schedule had always been predictable: work, gym, occasional book club meetings. But now, every detail felt suspicious. Every late meeting, every extra hour at the gym, every glance at her phone was a potential clue. I started small, scrolling through her social media. Her posts were perfectly curated. Pictures of us at dinners, sunsets on vacations, and inspirational quotes about relationships. Nothing seemed out of place, which only made me more suspicious. It was too perfect. Then I noticed the comments. Among the usual likes and generic remarks from friends was one name that stood out: Mike Stanton. "Great form at yesterday's session," he'd written on a photo Claire had posted from the gym. A harmless comment, maybe, but now it felt like a breadcrumb on the trail of betrayal. I scrolled further, my stomach tightening with every interaction between them. There weren't many, just enough to suggest familiarity without drawing attention. But knowing what I knew, it was impossible to see them as innocent. That evening, I decided to call Mike. I needed to hear his voice, to gauge his reaction, to see if I could catch him off guard. I dialed his number, my hand trembling as the phone rang. "Hey, Ethan." Mike answered, his tone annoyingly cheerful. "What's up, man?" "Not much," I said, forcing casualness into my voice. "Just wanted to check in about my training schedule. Are we still good for tomorrow?" "Of course," he said easily. "Same time as usual." Looking forward to it, his tone was so relaxed, so unaffected that it made me second-guess everything. Could someone who'd crossed a line with my wife sound this calm? Or was he just that good at hiding it? "Cool," I said, my voice tight. "By the way, you've been working with Claire a lot lately, huh?" There was a brief pause, just long enough to set my heart racing. "Yeah," he said, his tone steady. "She's been killing it in her workouts. You should be proud of her." The comment was innocuous on the surface, but it felt loaded, like an unspoken challenge. I ended the call quickly, my chest tight with anger and uncertainty. That night, as I sat in the living room scrolling through more of Claire's posts, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You're looking in the wrong place." My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the message, the words blurring as adrenaline coursed through me. Who was this? And what do they mean? I typed back quickly. "Who is this? What do you mean?" But no reply came. The cryptic message rattled me, casting a shadow over everything I thought I knew. Was someone watching me? Or was it just a cruel joke? The days that followed were a blur of suspicion and doubt. Claire's behavior seemed both normal and not. Her smiles felt too bright, her excuses too practiced. I started noticing small things I'd never paid attention to before. The way she angled her phone away when texting, the quick glances at her watch when she thought I wasn't looking. One night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, her phone buzzed. She picked it up quickly, her expression unreadable as she read the message. "Who's that?" I asked casually, my heart pounding. "Oh, just Maggie," she said, smiling. "We're planning next week's book club." Her answer felt rehearsed, and the tightness in my chest grew. The following week, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Claire had told me she was going to the gym for a late session, so I waited half an hour before heading there myself. When I arrived, the parking lot was mostly empty, except for Claire's car and a few others. I stepped inside, the familiar hum of the gym greeting me as I scanned the room. She wasn't on the machines or in the yoga studio. Instead, I found her in the corner, talking to someone I couldn't see clearly. I moved closer, my heart pounding as I tried to stay out of sight. When I finally got a clear view, my stomach dropped. She was with Mike. They weren't touching, but their body language screamed intimacy. The way they leaned toward each other, the way Mike's hand hovered just close enough to brush hers. It was enough to confirm my worst fears. I retreated before they could see me, my mind racing with anger and betrayal. Back in the car, I sat in silence, gripping the steering wheel as I tried to steady my breathing. The pieces were falling into place, each one more damning than the last. But something still didn't add up. Claire's behavior, the cryptic text, the money I'd noticed missing from our account. It all pointed to something bigger than just an affair. The truth was out there, just beyond my reach, and I was going to find it. The days after seeing Claire with Mike at the gym felt like walking through a fog, the lines between reality and suspicion blurring more with each passing moment. My chest tightened whenever I saw her. Her smile, once comforting, now felt like a shield, a barrier hiding a truth I was desperate to uncover. But I knew I couldn't confront her without more evidence. My emotions were a storm, waves of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak crashing over me in relentless succession. Some moments, I convinced myself I could forgive her, that this was salvageable if she just came clean. Other moments, I imagined scenarios where I left her, taking Liam and walking away from the wreckage of our marriage. But above it all was one thought. I need the truth. Claire's best friend, Maggie, had always been a constant in our lives. She was the type of friend who showed up unannounced, wine in hand, ready to gossip about her latest dating disaster. But lately, her visits had become less frequent, her demeanor more guarded. One evening, she stopped by while Claire was out, her expression unusually serious. "Hey, Ethan," she said, her voice hesitant as she stepped inside. "Can we talk?" The question caught me off guard. Sure," I said, gesturing for her to sit. Maggie hesitated, glancing toward the door as if to make sure no one was listening. "I don't want to overstep," she began, her tone cautious. "But I've been worried about Claire." Her words sent a chill through me. "Worried?" I asked, my voice tight. "About what?" Maggie sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know how to say this," she said, "but she's been different lately. Distant. And I don't think it's just work stress." The knot in my stomach tightened. "Do you know something?" I pressed, my voice trembling. Maggie hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap. "Not for sure," she admitted. "But if I were you, I'd pay attention. Things aren't always what they seem." Her words were cryptic, frustratingly vague, but they only fueled my determination. That night, after Claire had gone to bed, I decided to search her home office. It was a long shot, but I was desperate for answers. The room was meticulously organized, every pen and paper in its place. It was the kind of order that felt unnatural, like it was hiding chaos beneath the surface. As I rifled through the drawers, I found nothing out of the ordinary: bills, receipts, notes from work. But then I noticed a small locked drawer at the bottom of the desk. My pulse quickened as I tried to open it, but the lock held firm. Frustrated, I looked around for something to break it open. After a few minutes, I found a small screwdriver and managed to jimmy the lock. Inside, I found a collection of old photographs, letters, and a key to a storage unit. The photographs were faded, their edges worn from years of handling. Most of them were of Claire, younger and smiling, but there were a few with other people I didn't recognize. And then I found one that made my stomach drop. It was a picture of Claire standing beside a man I vaguely recognized, his arm around her shoulder in a gesture that felt too familiar. It was Mike. The letters were just as damning. They were from Mike, written in a tone that was both affectionate and intimate. My hands trembled as I read them, each word a dagger to the heart. One letter stood out. "Claire, I know this is complicated, but I can't stop thinking about you. I don't know how much longer we can keep this hidden. Let me know when you're ready to take the next step. M." The words burned in my mind, each one a confirmation of my worst fears. Claire and Mike weren't just having an affair. They were planning something that could destroy everything we'd built. But what was the storage unit? And what was she hiding there? The next day, I I couldn't hold back any longer. I went to the gym during my usual training session, determined to confront Mike. He greeted me with his usual grin, his posture relaxed and confident. "Ethan," he said cheerfully, "ready to hit it hard today?" I didn't respond. Instead, I held up one of the letters I'd found, my hand trembling with anger. "What the hell is this, Mike?" I demanded. His grin faltered, his eyes narrowing as he glanced at the paper. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his tone defensive. "Don't lie to me." I snapped. "I found your letters. I know what you've been doing with Claire." Mike sighed, his calm demeanor slipping as he leaned against the wall. "Look, Ethan," he said, "it's not what you think. That's what everyone keeps saying." I shot back. "Then explain it to me. Tell me why you've been sneaking around with my wife." Mike hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Complicated?" I repeated bitterly. "Try me." Mike sighed again, rubbing the back of his neck. "Claire's been going through a lot," he said carefully. "She came to me for support, and things got blurry." His vague answer only fueled my anger. "Blurry?" I snapped. "You call this blurry? You've been lying to me, to my face, for months." Mike straightened, his expression hardening. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said. "But Claire, she's not who you think she is." His words sent a chill through me. But before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me standing alone in the gym. The confrontation had left me with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. Mike knew more than he was letting on. That evening, I went to the address listed on the key tag I'd found in Claire's desk. The storage facility was small and nondescript, tucked away on the outskirts of town. I found the unit easily, my hands trembling as I unlocked it. Inside, I found a collection of boxes, each one labeled with vague titles like memories and old papers. As I rifled through them, I found more photographs, more letters, and more evidence of Claire's betrayal. But then I found something I hadn't expected, a series of pictures that included me. They were from years ago, before Claire and I were married, taken at events I barely remembered. And in the background of several pictures was Mike. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just an affair. This was something deeper, something that had been building for years. As I sat in the storage unit, surrounded by the evidence of Claire's secrets, I felt the weight of betrayal settle over me like a shroud. But I wasn't done yet. Not until I had the whole truth. The dim light of the storage unit flickered, casting shadows over the boxes and photographs strewn around me. My chest tightened as I stared at the image in my hands. A picture of Claire from years ago, her smile radiant as she stood beside a younger Mike Stanton. In the background, barely noticeable but unmistakable, was me. The realization was like a punch to the gut. Mike hadn't just entered our lives recently. He'd been there all along, lurking in the background, a shadow in the edges of our memories. How had I not seen it before? My mind raced as I sifted through more of the contents of the storage unit. The letters, the photographs, even old keepsakes from vacations Claire had never mentioned taking. All of it painted a picture of a connection between Claire and Mike that predated our marriage. But why? What was their endgame? At the bottom of one of the boxes, I found a leather-bound journal. It was old, the edges of the pages frayed, but the handwriting inside was unmistakably Claire's. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling. This was her private world, her unfiltered thoughts. Would it give me the answers I needed? The first entries were innocent enough, notes about her college classes, musings about her future career. But then the tone shifted. Mike says he believes in me. It's nice to have someone who sees me, really sees me. I feel guilty sometimes, but Ethan doesn't understand me the way Mike does. Is it wrong to want more? I don't know what I'd do without Mike. He's been my rock through so much. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. She'd been confiding in him for years, long before I'd even realized something was wrong. And I hadn't seen it. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me, anger and heartbreak warring for control. How could she do this? How could she let someone else into the sacred space of our marriage? But beneath the anger was a deeper, more painful question. Had I failed her? Had I pushed her away without realizing it, leaving her vulnerable to someone like Mike? I shook my head, refusing to let the doubt take hold. No, this wasn't on me. She had choices, and she'd made them. As I sat in the storage unit, lost in thought, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You're closer than you think. Don't stop now." The text sent a chill through me. Who was this person? And how did they know what I was doing? Before I could respond, there was a knock on the storage unit door. I froze, my heart racing as I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a rusted wrench, and approached the door cautiously. When I opened it, I was shocked to see Maggie standing there, her face pale and drawn. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, lowering the wrench, but keeping my guard up. Maggie hesitated, her eyes darting to the boxes behind me. "I could ask you the same thing," she said, her voice trembling. "Claire told me about this place, but I didn't think you'd find it." Her words sent a wave of anger through me. "You knew about this?" I snapped. "All of it? The pictures, the letters, the lies?" Maggie flinched, her gaze dropping to the ground. "It's not what you think," she said softly. "I didn't know everything, but I knew enough to be worried. That's why I tried to warn you." "Warn me?" I repeated bitterly. "You've been her best friend for years, and this is how you warn me? By sitting on the sidelines while she tears our marriage apart." Maggie's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. "I was trying to protect you," she said. "From what?" I demanded. "From yourself," she said quietly. Her words hung in the air, cutting deeper than I cared to admit. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling with both anger and desperation. Maggie hesitated, then took a step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are things about Claire you don't know," she said. "And Mike, he's not the one you should be worried about." Her cryptic words sent a chill through me. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. Maggie shook her head, her tears spilling over. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. "It's not my story to tell." I clenched my fists, my frustration boiling over. "Then why are you here?" I snapped. "Because I care about you," she said softly. "And I don't want you to get hurt any more than you already have." Her words did little to ease the storm inside me. But before I could respond, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone with more questions than answers. That night, I decided it was time to confront Claire. No more waiting, no more guessing. I needed the truth, and I was going to get it. When I got home, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I entered, her smile faltering when she saw my expression. "Hey," she said cautiously. "What's wrong?" I held up the journal, my hand trembling with anger. "This," I said, my voice low but sharp. "This is what's wrong." Her eyes widened, her face paling as she recognized the book in my hand. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Does it matter?" I shot back. "I found it, Claire, just like I found the letters, the pictures, the storage unit. I know everything." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that wouldn't come. "How long?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "How long have you been lying to me?" Her tears spilled over as she buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I never wanted it to get this far." Her apology felt hollow, like a whisper in a storm. "Then tell me the truth," I said, my voice trembling with both anger and heartbreak. "What's really going on between you and Mike?" Claire hesitated, her sobs growing quieter as she wiped her tears. "It's not Mike," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Her words sent a chill through me. "What?" I asked, my chest tightening. "It's not Mike," she repeated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I lied to protect someone else." The revelation hit me like a freight train, the pieces of the puzzle scattering in my mind. "Then who is it?" I demanded, my voice rising. Claire looked up at me, her tear-filled eyes filled with guilt and fear. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. Her refusal was like a slap, the weight of her secrets pressing down on me like a stone. "You don't have a choice," I said coldly. "You tell me now, or we're done." Her tears fell harder, and she nodded, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I'll tell you," she said softly, "but you have to promise me you'll listen to the whole story." The room seemed to spin as her words sank in. The truth was finally within reach. But was I ready to face it? Claire's words hung in the air between us, her tear-streaked face a portrait of guilt and fear. I sat down across from her, my hands trembling as I clasped them together. "Start talking," I said, my voice low but sharp. "No more lies. No more excuses. Just the truth." Claire nodded, her hands trembling as she wiped her tears. "It's not what you think," she said softly. "But it's bad, Matthew. I need you to promise me you'll listen to the whole story before you say anything. The audacity of her request made my stomach twist. I'm not promising you anything, I snapped. You're the one who broke this, Claire. The least you can do is tell me the truth. She flinched, but she nodded, taking a deep, shuddering breath before she began. It started years ago, she said, her voice trembling. Before we were even married. Mike, he was always there in the background. He was your coach, your friend. But he was more than that to me. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. You mean you were seeing him? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. Claire shook her head quickly. No, she said firmly. It wasn't like that. Not at first. He was just someone I could talk to. Someone who understood me in ways I didn't even realize I needed. Her words felt like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. When did it change? I asked, my voice cold. Claire hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap. It changed after we got married, she admitted. I was happy with you, but there were things I couldn't talk to you about. Things I didn't even understand myself. Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands, her sobs shaking her shoulders. I was weak, Matthew, she said through her tears. And Mike, he took advantage of that. My fists clenched at her words, my mind racing with the implications. What does that mean? I demanded. Claire looked up at me, her face pale and her eyes red. It means he knew how to get inside my head, she said. He made me feel like I wasn't enough for you, like you deserved someone better. Her confession sent a wave of rage through me, my teeth grinding as I struggled to keep my voice steady. So what? I asked bitterly. You let him manipulate you? You let him destroy us. Claire shook her head, her tears falling harder. It wasn't just him, she said softly. There was someone else. Someone who made it worse. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Who? I asked, my voice trembling. Claire hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap as she looked away. It was James, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The name hit me like a freight train, the pieces of the puzzle scattering in my mind. James? I repeated, my chest tightening. Liam's teacher? Claire nodded, her tears spilling over. He and Mike, they were working together, she said, her voice breaking. They were feeding each other information, playing both sides. I didn't see it until it was too late. Her confession felt like a slap, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a stone. As Claire's sobs quieted, I pressed her for more details. What about the storage unit? I asked, my voice sharp. What were you hiding there? Claire hesitated, her hands trembling. It wasn't just me, she said softly. They made me keep things there, letters, pictures, anything that could tie them to this. They said it was for my protection, but I think they were trying to protect themselves. The anger inside me burned hotter. They were blackmailing you, I said, my voice trembling. Claire nodded, her tears spilling over. I didn't know what to do, Matthew, she said, her voice breaking. They made me feel like I didn't have a choice. Her words sent a wave of rage and helplessness through me. These men, Mike and James, hadn't just betrayed me. They'd manipulated Claire, turned her against me, and used her vulnerability for their own gain. The room seemed to spin as the weight of Claire's confession settled over me. My mind raced with questions, each one more painful than the last. How had I missed this? How had I let these men infiltrate my life, my marriage, without seeing the signs? I stood abruptly, pacing the room as anger and heartbreak warred for control. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I demanded, my voice trembling. Why did you let it get this far? Claire flinched, her tears falling harder. I was scared, she said softly. I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't want you to see me like this. Her words cut deep, but they weren't enough to extinguish the fire burning inside me. You should have trusted me, I said, my voice breaking. We're supposed to be a team, Claire, and instead, you let them tear us apart. Claire nodded, her sobs shaking her shoulders. I know, she said softly. And I'm sorry, Matthew. I'm so sorry. As we sat in the silence of our shattered trust, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, just like before. I hesitated before answering, my chest tight with anticipation. Hello, I said, my voice sharp. Ethan, a familiar voice said on the other end. It was Mike. My fists clenched, my anger boiling over. What do you want? I snapped. We need to talk, Mike said, his tone calm but firm. There's more to this than you know. Meet me at the gym tomorrow night. Before I could respond, the line went dead. The call left me shaken, my anger simmering just below the surface. Mike had answers, and I was going to get them one way or another. That night, I couldn't sleep. The pieces of the puzzle swirled in my mind, each one more damning than the last. Claire's confession, the letters, the photographs, the cryptic messages from Maggie. All of it pointed to a web of betrayal that went deeper than I'd ever imagined. But now, I was ready to face it. To face Mike. To face the truth. The gym was eerily quiet when I arrived, its fluorescent lights flickering faintly as I stepped through the doors. Mike had chosen the late hour on purpose, ensuring there would be no witnesses to our confrontation. It felt fitting. This entire ordeal had been cloaked in shadows and secrets, and now, we'd bring it into the light. I spotted Mike near the free weights, leaning casually against the rack as if we were meeting for a casual chat. His calm demeanor only fueled my anger. How could he act so nonchalant after everything he'd done? You wanted to talk, I said sharply as I approached, my fists clenched at my sides. Start talking. Mike straightened, his expression serious now. I know you're angry, he said, and you have every right to be, but you don't know the whole story. Then tell me, I snapped, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and James have been screwing with my life for years. Mike sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. It's more complicated than that, he said. We never meant for it to get this far. I scoffed, my anger bubbling over. You never meant for it to get this far? I repeated bitterly. You manipulated my wife, tore apart my marriage, and for what? What the hell were you trying to accomplish? Mike hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. It started with James, he said finally. He had a grudge against you, something about an old rivalry. At first, I didn't want to get involved, but what? I demanded. But then Claire came into the picture, he admitted, his voice soft. She was vulnerable, and James saw an opportunity. He convinced me to help him, to guide her towards certain decisions. His confession hit like a punch to the gut, my fists trembling with the urge to hit him. Decisions? I repeated coldly. You mean destroying our marriage? Manipulating her into thinking she couldn't trust me? Mike nodded, his expression filled with regret. I didn't see it that way at first, he said. But I see it now. And I'm sorry, Ethan, for everything. His apology felt hollow, like a whisper in the middle of a storm. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said, my voice low and trembling. You don't get to just apologize and walk away from this. Mike flinched, but didn't argue. Before I could press further, the sound of footsteps echoed through the gym. I turned to see James stepping into the room, his presence commanding and unsettling. He looked calm, almost amused, as he approached. Ah, Ethan, James said smoothly. I see Mike has filled you in. My anger flared at the sight of him, my fists clenching tighter. You've got a lot of nerve showing up here, I said coldly. James chuckled, his confidence infuriating. I figured you'd want to hear the truth from me, he said. After all, I was the one pulling the strings. His words sent a chill through me, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. You admit it, I said, my voice trembling. You admit you've been manipulating Claire and tearing apart my marriage. James shrugged, his expression smug. Claire made her own choices, he said. All I did was help her along. My anger boiled over, and I took a step toward him, my fists raised. But Mike stepped between us, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Ethan, don't, Mike said. He's not worth it. But James's smirk only deepened, his eyes glinting with malice. Go ahead, he taunted. Hit me if it makes you feel better. But it won't change anything. I froze, my fists trembling as I struggled to control the rage inside me. You're a coward, I said finally, my voice cold. You couldn't stand on your own, so you had to tear down someone else to feel powerful. James's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered, his tone mocking. Believe what you want, he said. But you and Claire were already broken. I just sped up the process. His words cut deep, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt. This ends now, I said firmly. You stay away from me, from Claire, from Liam. Do you hear me? James chuckled but didn't respond, his silence speaking louder than any words. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing with the weight of everything I'd learned. James and Mike had manipulated Claire, driven a wedge between us, and reveled in the chaos they created. but they hadn't broken me. When I got home, Claire was waiting, her face pale and tear-streaked. She stood as I entered, her hands trembling as she reached for me. "Matthew," she said softly, "did you find him?" I nodded, my chest tight as I met her gaze. "I found them," I said, "and I got the answers I needed." Her tears spilled over as she stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I let them get into my head, and I let them tear us apart. But I never stopped loving you. Please believe that." Her words were earnest, but they weren't enough to erase the pain. "I don't know if I can trust you again," I said honestly, my voice breaking. "But I'm willing to try, if you are." Claire nodded quickly, her tears falling harder. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. Her promise felt like a lifeline, a fragile thread of hope in the wreckage of our marriage. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, I felt like we had a chance.